You're about to enter into a new world of knowledge, curiosities, and high strangeness. This is a podcast of Straight Up Strange Productions.
You're listening to Mysteries and Monsters. I'm your host, Paul Bestel. Imagine one evening, realising you'd run out of coffee, and therefore decide to head off to the local shops to stock up. This seemingly mundane task would allegedly change the lives of 4 seemingly normal people, 2 adults and 2 children, forever. Yet the events of that evening have become probably the most controversial of any Scottish UFO case, and many dismiss it as either a hoax, a delusion, or a simple case of misidentification. Our good friend Malcolm Robinson rejoins us to lay the events before us to make up our own minds. But as always, before that, don't forget, you can support Mysteries and Monsters by signing up at patreon.com/mysteriesandmonsters. $4 a month gets you ad-free episodes, guaranteed early releases, bonus content, and from this month onwards, all patrons will be put into a draw to receive a free Mysteries and Monsters t-shirt. For more details, go to patreon.com/mysteriesandmonsters or click the link in the show notes as always. A big thank you to my latest patrons, Eli, Jonathan and Mose. Thank you very much. You can find Mysteries and Monsters across all social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Mastodon, LinkedIn, and please subscribe to the Mysteries and Monsters channel on YouTube. You can also visit mysteriesandmonsters.com for episodes, news, and Mysteries and Monsters merchandise. Thank you as always to Dean Bestel for his marvellous artwork. The show is produced by Brennan Storr of the Ghost Story Guys, and Mysteries and Monsters is delighted to be a part of the Straight Up Strange network. A late night trip to the shops may never be the same again for you after you hear about the Falkland Hill UFO incident. Today we head back to beautiful Scotland as we look into a case that some consider the most controversial UFO encounter in both Scotland and British history. Scotland was a hotspot of high strangeness of ufology in the late 80s and 1990s, and the Falkland Hill incident of 1996 is the cherry on that cake. To explain this incredible case is our good friend Malcolm Robinson. Malcolm, welcome back.
It's great to be back, Paul. Fantastic. Nice to be back.
Yes, well, I hope you're easing yourself into the new year, sir, because as we were joking before we started, you've had one hell of a hectic year. How many conferences can one man fit in a year?
Oh, well, I had a record for myself there, Paul. I did 7 conferences in 2.5 weeks, 2 in England and the rest in Scotland. And it was unbelievable. I didn't know if I was coming or going, shall we say. But it's all good fun. It's all good fun, you know. Yeah.
Are you surprised, Malcolm, that there is the appetite? Because 2 of the most regular lectures and cases that you're often asked to discuss is obviously the Sorky Poltergeist and obviously the Deckman Woods incident. Are you surprised that these 2 cases are still so popular with people? Because, I mean, they're fabulous cases. You've investigated both of them deeply. You've, as we've mentioned previously on some of your earlier appearances, Malcolm, you own Bob Taylor's trousers. You've tracked down as many people as possible in regards to the Sorky case. You have sort of really been the guiding light for both of these, I would suspect, over the last 10 years.
Yeah, there's no diminishing in the interest, certainly, in these cases, Paul, you know, not by a long chalk, absolutely. And this is why we had to write these books about that, to really get that out into the public domain and really show people what's going on in Scotland with the Sorky case and the Bob Taylor Deckman Woods case. And we're living in this era now where more and more people have got access to the internet, to television shows, and they're learning all the time, you know, about all these wonderful Scottish cases. And we never had that when I was growing up. We only had about 2 or 3 channels, during my day. And even then, any programmes to do with UFOs were all kind of one-sided. So it's good that we've got this opportunity. But to answer your question, no, it's great that people still are interested in these cases. I must admit, sometimes when I get asked to do lectures on these cases, I often wonder why. These are old cases, they're over 40 years at the Declan Woods, but people still want to hear about it. People still want to find out what's going on, and often say, because I said I would never, speak about these cases again because it's old hat, but. If you imagine it like this, Paul, if you went to see the Rolling Stones and you came out the hall and you were saying, they never played Honky Tonk Woman, they never played Brown Sugar, they never, playing their old hits. It's like when I'm asked to do lectures, it's like playing old hits, and so I don't want to let anybody down. If they ask me, I'll do it for sure.
Well, I think you're right, though. It is one of those things that both of them, not only in the history of the weirdness of Scotland, I think in the history of the British Isles, Malcolm, for me, I think they're two of the most compelling cases that have happened in the last 60 years, easily, for me, in my personal opinion. And I think often when people talk about the paranormal and they look at the United Kingdom or the British Isles, and I've said this with other researchers over the years, Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland tend to get short shrift, Malcolm, and everybody's running about Rendlesham or chasing down headless horsemen running around Dorset and stuff. And I think when you've got 2 cases of that magnitude there, it needs to be promoted and saved for the rest of us, because often a lot of great cases will fall by the wayside, primarily because they're not happening in certain parts of the world.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it still intrigues me as to why we've not had any cases of the same ilk today. The Falkland case, what's going on in Bonnybridge and the Declan Woods case. We don't appear to have any major UFO cases today. And it makes me wonder, why is this? Why is it people don't wish to come forward? They've maybe seen an extraordinary sight, but they don't want to put their hands up and go, speak to anybody. I don't know, but I'd like to think that these cases, these big cases, are still out there in Scotland, as they are, I guess, in England and the rest of Europe.
Well, it's one of those things, because obviously of my love of this subject and having both of the books in those 2 particular cases that you've written, Malcolm, in my normal job, I tend to speak. I work for a very large organisation in the UK, and therefore we have employees that live all over the place. And I remember, and I think this hadn't happened the last time we spoke, which was about 9 months ago. And a gentleman rang me up, and he lived in Sorky, and his address came up, and I said, oh, it's very interesting. You're probably the first person I've ever spoken to from that particular area. And he said, oh yeah, you've heard of it as well, have you? And I said, yeah. And so we basically started talking about the case. And he said, yeah, everybody knows about it here. Yeah, we all believe her. He said, my best mate still lives on that street. He said, the whole street's haunted. Wasn't just her house.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. And when I wrote the book on the Socky poltergeist, I soon learned that there were other people in that same street who had poltergeist manifestations and disturbances and bangings and rappings and smells. And it was not just in the principal house, which was 19 Park Crescent in Sorky. It was other numbers in that street as well. Extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah. I was really impressed, Malcolm, that he was very matter of fact about it. Wasn't, as far as he was concerned, it was a fairly normal conversation. I think he was very impressed that a Sassenach knew where he lived more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to know that. I live in Sorky just now, and the Sorky poltergeist house it's not really that far away from where I currently live, So the new occupants there, nothing's happened, since then, since the 1960s when it all exploded into the public domain. It's been quiet in that house since then. As for the other houses in that street, I believe that there's still things going on, but not massively, just, the odd things.
Yeah. Well, as we touched on a while ago as we started the conversation, your new book that's come out, Malcolm, is probably one of, if not the most controversial UFO alien encounters of the modern era in both Scotland and the UK. This is a case that seemed to happen when Scotland, for me, seemed to be inundated. There was a lot of strange things going on, and this was during the birth of cable television really exploding in the UK. Programs were appearing all over the place covering ufology. The X-Files was one of the most watched programs in the world. And yet Scotland, for some reason, seemed to be at the epicenter of something. This particular case seemed to come towards the end of everything that had gone on the previous sort of 10 years, I think, Malcolm, really. When you look back at this, do you think that one of the reasons this case has been left alone is because of the content of what the witnesses go through?
Partly that, Paul. We, that is SPI, Strange Phenomena Investigations, and myself and my fellow colleagues of the team, we only had one sit-down interview with the family. Two of the witnesses. There were 4 witnesses all told, and we'll come to that in a moment. And so we only had you only had the one sitting with them. We did audio tape a lot of that conversation, which was made up the big part of the book. We did also have telephone conversations as well. And we also had other investigators who came back to us and said this and said that, which was fine. But the principle, the main bulk of that book was based solely on this one-off conversation sitting in their living room. It is controversial, and certainly we can look at why it is so controversial. By God, it is. It's been the talk of the town for many years. I've been attacked, not physically, thankfully, but verbally and through emails about this case, and not everybody shares my ideas about the case. We've had a bad time. People said we were disruptive to the witnesses. We had somebody pretending to be me in the village where this happened, Newton of Falkland and Fife, chapping on people's doors and said, "Hi, my name's Malcolm Robinson. I'm a UFO investigator. I believe a big UFO case happened to you. I wonder if you heard anything about it or maybe saw something yourself." And when I heard that, Paul, that somebody was impersonating me, I just couldn't believe it. What's going on here? But to start the ball rolling, the case for your listeners, it happened at a location near Newton of Falkland in Fife. You've got the major town of Falkland is just maybe about a mile or so up the road. You've got this little hamlet called Newton of Falkland, and it happened on the September the 23rd, 1996, and the witnesses went out 3 times that night, which we'll come to as we go through the storyline, and they went out roughly about 8:05. Now, to be honest with you, this case, to all intents and purposes, is really quite staggering. It borders on the unbelievable, and even for myself, was quite hard to accept. But having said that, we must realise that we live in a strange world with many mysteries which currently tax our minds, and it would be absolutely foolish, Paul, to turn our backs on cases just like this, just because they appear absurd. We can't do that. So the witnesses involved with this case was Mary Morrison. These are pseudonyms, by the way. There's not the real names. She was aged 33 at the time. Peter Morrison, her son, was 10. We had Jane, which was Mary's best friend. She was 38 years of age. And Susan, who was Jane's daughter, she was 16 years of age at the time. So that's the principal witnesses who were involved with the case. Now, the story goes that on that evening of September the 23rd, they were back at Jane's house, and they were just having a wee chat. That's Jane and Mary Morrison. And they says, "You any coffee?" "No, I'm sorry, we don't have any coffee." "Oh, let's go down to Fouquet. It's a wee town near Newton of Falkland. Let's buy a jar of coffee." So they jumped in the car, and they also took little Peter in the car as well, and they went off to Fouquet. Now, that neck of the woods, that area, Paul, is very desolate. It's all farmland, a little cottage here. It's all grass and trees. So there's very little built-up houses. So as they were driving towards Fruki, along this little country road, little B road, they initially saw this large black triangular shaped craft hovering just off centre between the road and the fields. And it was putting down 3 tubular lights. If you can imagine these lights coming down from the underside of this triangular craft. And it was doing like a swirling dance. And he went, Jesus Christ. What's that? What the hell's that? And these are country folk. They're aware of aircraft flying over their property, helicopters, etc. And they knew they were looking at something strange. So they stopped the car. Now, this road is, as I say, it's just a very, very small B road, not a lot of traffic. They stopped the car and they started flashing their, I know it sounds daft, but they would flash the headlights of their car at this object. And by some coincidence or not, there was a flash in their direction as well, as if to say, oh, yeah, we see you, you know, it's us. And what they did then, the object just slowly tilted and it just screamed away into the sky and was gone. So they went to Fruki, they bought their jar of coffee. They also bought, there's a number of things that makes this controversial, they also bought a copy of UFO magazine. By the wonderful, sadly missed Graham Birdsall. And apparently Mary Morrison was a subscriber anyway, or she regularly bought it, I should say. So she was well versed, well up to the UFO scene, so to speak. So they got their jar of coffee and they went back to Jane's house. And as they went into Jane's house, Jane's daughter, Susan, she was 16 years of age, and her mother said, You'll never guess what we've just seen on this road there. What? One of the bloody UFO things. Oh, wait, don't be so silly, mother. And she says, no. And, you know, the daughter thought the mother was just taking the mickey. And eventually Susan says, okay, let's go out and see if it's still there. Come on then, come on. So Susan jumped in the car. So now we have Susan, 16 years of age, Peter Morrison, 10. And Jane and Mary Morrison as well. And as they approached this area, the same or similar black triangular-shaped craft came from a distance, I beg your pardon, and came swiftly over the car roof, at which point young Peter burst out crying, Mum, it's going to crash, it's going to crash. He thought it was going to crash into the car, and it went away. And then they went down this little side road into farmers' fields where there's a forest. And then suddenly they became aware of these columns of light, these red, blue and green columns of light coming up from the forest floor through the canopy of trees. If you can imagine, Paul, the Second World War and where they used to illuminate the German bombers flying over London, it was like that, you know, but only colour. And so anyway, they stopped the car there and they stood fascinated to go out the car. What's this? And this is not a million miles away from their home as well, so they've never seen this before. And then suddenly they saw above them, probably only about 600, 700, 800 feet above them, which is not high, hundreds of tiny star-like stars, like stars in the sky, but only lower right down. These were not in the depths of space. They were about 800, 900 feet above their heads, all twinkling away. Beautiful they were, she said. Then also on nearby Falkland Hill, which is quite a large hill in the area, was what they described as an orange squashed ball. If you can imagine, just like a ball, but you squashed it from the top and the bottom, and it was elongated. And it had these black lines sparkling about it, and it was like electricity coming off it as well. And they went, God, Bennett, what the hell's going on here? And at that point, they claimed that there was a tremendous flash, blue flash, illuminated just behind the car, and they jumped into the car and screamed off home. Now, one would think, after an episode like that, you would not dare go back out. Not true. As far as they were concerned, not true. The mystery, the intrigue, the what is this, got the better of them. They were just desperate to go back out and say, well, let's see what's going on here. So they went back down the same way road, and as I say, we're not talking about up area. I've got to just say that to your listeners. It's all fields and stuff and a forest. So they went down there, and then they saw a sight which they just couldn't fathom. They couldn't believe they were looking at. Again, this is one of the many, and not a many, controversial aspects of this is. So imagine the scene. You jump out the car. You're looking, there's a small, we call in Scotland a dyke. It's a small wall, we call it. In England you would say it's a small wall, like a wee rounded stones to keep the sheep and cattle coming over. And in front of this forest of trees, which was maybe about, I don't know, about 1,000, 2,000 yards away from the car across the farmer's field, was this beautiful blue glow. It was like a blue mist sitting in front of the trees. Now, it gets even stranger, because in front of this blue mist, she said, when I interviewed her, she says, Malcolm, they weren't 5, they weren't 10, they weren't 15, she said hundreds of small grey beings. They were lifting things, cubes, cylinders, boxes, lifting things on the farmer's field and carrying them towards this large black structured object which was nestling in this wee alcove, if you like, in the woods. And to the side, to the left and to the right of this amazing spectacle, there were these ones who were probably, again, I've got to say it, I know it sounds bizarre, she said 14, 15 feet, two big creatures either side of these smaller creatures, the typical greys, 3.5, 4 feet tall. And these tall ones were like as if they were in control. It was like they were the gaffer of a building site or a manager of a factory or something. They were just standing looking at this amazing spectacle. And then at one point, one of these big creatures just bent down and put the back of his hand on the grass. And for what reason, goodness knows. There was also a white spherical ball just sitting above the grass as well. And at that point, they decided to jump back in the car because they were a wee bit frightened by now. So they didn't, they didn't want to be abducted or anything like that.
Yeah.
So they're sitting in the car. And then as they sat in the car, here's another point which makes this case so controversial. At this point, and I've never heard this in any UFO lore anywhere, in any books, at any conferences or any TV shows, what they said they saw was there was several large bubble-like cocoons, like if you can imagine a soap bubble, but only about 8 feet tall. Inside these soap bubbles were these small greys, these 3.5 to 4 feet tall greys, bluey grey, translucent bodies, pear-shaped heads, black ink almond-shaped eyes, and it was like they were being blown across this farmer's field. And then at that point, Susan, the daughter who was sitting in the back of this car, screamed out, "There's one outside staring in the window." And so at that point, they just put the car into gear and shot off back, back to their house. And such a big case, as I'm trying to make a long story short. And at this point, I think it was Jane's husband was going out to work, and they told him he didn't really believe them, but he loaned them the binoculars as well just to see. So they went out again. But this time they went to a different part of the area where pretty much the same thing was unfolding, would you believe, even though it was a different area. So this was going on for quite a considerable amount of time. And when I meant to say that before the car sped away from that area, when Susan screamed out that there's a grey standing next to the car, Mary, she said, "Malcolm, I felt as if my head was being pushed down onto the steering wheel. It was crazy. And there was these bales of hay, which was in the farmer's field, being pushed, being moved across towards the car." Now, some people may say that may be a screen memory. One of the ladies claimed that she saw these cocoon-like spheres encased with these little greys, whilst the other lady, she said she saw these bales, straw bales being pushed along. So you take out of that what you want. Now, it wasn't just that the events transpired at that location. It's fair to say that there farmhouse, and this I'm talking now, Mary's farmhouse, had a lot of poltergeist manifestations in there as well. There was a strange burning smell that pervaded the family home for weeks on end. And they also claim that there was a ghostly presence of a dog in their family home. Now, the family have a cat, and they have a wee water bowl for the cat. So the family's sitting having their breakfast, and then next thing they hear the lapping of the water, the displacement of the water in the cat's bowl. They look down, no cat. All they see is a displacement of this water as if it's been drawn up. So that was strange, you know. And also, it's fair to say that Susan, Jane's daughter, she noticed a very strange bruise just on her shoulder, which came up that same night. And also she had a big bruise on her right buttock, and also a smaller bruise under her right breast, just on her ribs. And she says that they were not there prior to that experience. And Mary didn't have any marks on her body, but she did complain of a severe pain on the joint of her right shoulder, which was quite painful to touch, actually. The little boy, Peter, he never had any marks on his body at all. And as the weeks rolled on, both Jane and Susan started to find even more marks on their body. And we're talking like scoop marks and bruises, etc. Now, we mentioned at the start about this as being a controversial case, so I'm now going to give you some more for instances, Paul.
Yeah.
When we were in the family home, in Mary's home with her son, we were talking all about what was going on. She gave us permission to record this and also record Peter's testimony as well. And then Peter suddenly says, Mal, Mr. Robinson. Yes, Peter? Why don't you ask them why you're here? What do you mean, Peter? He says, there are three of them standing just over there next to the window. So myself and my colleague Billy Devlin and other researchers turned round in high hopes, big expectations that there are going to be these greys standing there at the window. Yeah. And of course they were not. So we still took lots of photographs of the area, because you and I know that sometimes strange things can come up on camera, even if you don't see it, they may be there.
Yeah.
So I then looked at Peter's mother, and she had her head bowed, and I says, Mary, yes? Can you see what your son's claiming he can see? Oh, yes. Well, what do you see? I just see a shimmering, Malcolm. I just see this shimmering there, like a heat haze, and I know. If I stare at this for any length of time, they will just materialise. They'll come right up in front of me. And so she didn't want to look at that, you know. She proceeded to tell us that on one night she was looking, because her farmhouse, she doesn't stay there now, by the way, we'll cover that later. The farmhouse she stayed at, she was looking out, it's got a commanding view of the valley. It sits atop of this small rise, and it's got a big sweeping panoramic view of the valley. So one night she was... it was a warm summer's night, a rarity in Scotland, but there you go. And she was looking out the top window, and suddenly, and again, I can only tell you what was told to me, whether it's true, whether it's not. You go be witness testimony. She said she had her forearms on the windowsill. The window was open. She was looking out. It was a starry night, a lovely night. And then suddenly, it was like, you know when you're a kid, Paul, have you ever had an Airfix model?
Yeah.
Be it a plane and that, and all the wee bits are on wee kind of plastic sticks, and you've got to break them off and everything.
Yeah. Well,
once you've broken off those bits, it was like what you're left with. It was all pipes and bits and bobs and squares, and this underside of this UFO was only maybe about 30, 40 feet. It flew silently and slowly above her farmhouse, and then just disappeared out of view. On another occasion, she was looking out of the farmhouse, and she saw a red ball of light about the size of a basketball rushing from behind the house, in front of the house, towards a tree line. It stopped above the tree line, and then this secondary light, only white, joined it, and both were together above the trees. Now, another occasion, and this is again why it's so controversial. She says one day she was running a bath for her son Peter, and so she's on the phone. The bath is running, wee Peter's upstairs in the bathroom, and suddenly the mother, who was downstairs, hears, Mom, come quick, Mom. And so the mother threw the phone down, she bounded up the stairs, burst into the bathroom and says, What? What is it? And little Peter said that this small creature had just suddenly materialised in his bathroom. Now, the difference, Paul, between this one and worldwide Grace is this little fella had jagged teeth.
Yeah. And
he looked, quite evil, for want of a better word. And he suddenly just disappeared. Now, here's another case. The little boy, Peter, said to us in the interview that night, he says, yeah, Mr. Robinson, I had one of my friends came over to play, and we were playing upstairs and playing in my room with the little toy cars, and my friend says, who's that? And they looked out the window, and here was this, I wouldn't say it was grey, it was more white, this white little creature, the same size as a grey, just free floating. He wasn't standing on a shed roof or anything like that, or a windowsill. He was about 2 feet away from the window, floating on nothing, and then he just rose up into the air, and he was gone in seconds. So, I mean, these are quite crazy stuff that was going on at that time. And also what we did, like any investigation, you have to ensure that you dot the I's and cross the T's. So what we did was we wrote off to the various airports, both national, provincial, local, Prestwick Airport, also the police, to see if any members of the public had or told them about these sightings. And with the airports, all they said, I think it was Prestwick Airport, one of the airports anyway, said that there were tornado jets in the area on that particular night in September. Now, tornado jets, as you and I know, Paul, are very, very swift. They don't tend to hang around, and you hear them as well.
Yep.
So it clearly wasn't that for sure. And we did all the witness reports, etc. But the case, would you believe, the case was initially investigated by a chap called Brian Rooney from Quest International, who was part of the UFO magazine. And for love nor money, I cannot find this guy, Brian Rooney. And if any of your listeners know who this Scottish fella is, I would love to hear from them. They would.
Yeah. I think one of the aspects of this case that's always struck me as peculiar is that there seems to be a few problems, because obviously Mary was so switched on to what had happened to her, Malcolm, that she tried to report it as soon as possible, and they ended up giving her your old telephone number because she'd moved, so the line was disconnected, and that's how it ended up with Quest, who most people remember. I think it was Tony Todd was the lead, was he not, of that?
Tony Todd was involved with it, yeah, and also a chap called Larry Dean.
Yes.
I was involved with it as well. And you're quite right, because I was a man on the ground up in Scotland at the time, but I had moved house, so my number was discontinued. But we eventually got the case eventually, but yeah, that's right.
I think what's always struck me about this particular case, everything that you've talked about, it seems to be one of those cases, Malcolm, and you get this in all kinds of strange things, that there are certain people that will investigate things until things start getting weird, or weirder than you would normally describe. I think about 10 minutes into talking to these witnesses about this particular case, anybody who was investigating would have probably gone, whoa, hang on a minute, what is going on here? Because regardless of everything else that happened that evening, you'd got all these additional aspects to it, these strange friends that Peter had that went to school with him and helped him with his homework and visited him in his bedroom and in the bathroom and stuff. It was like layer upon layer upon layer, Malcolm. And I think when you're dealing with this kind of case, some people just don't want to go down that particular route, do they? They just go, no thanks, I'm only here for the sighting.
Absolutely, and you touched on something there that was going to bring into play anyway, and that was another aspect of what makes this case so controversial. And anybody reading the book, which is now available on Amazon, when they read that, they'll go, "Oh, come on," they won't believe it. And this is the part they probably won't believe, because when we were interviewing Mary and her son Peter in the room there, I says, it was either myself or Billy Devlin says to Peter, "Has anything else happened strange to you there?" And he went, "Oh, yes." And nonchalantly he says, "Yeah, it's just the other week there, I woke up and there was a small one at the foot of my bed." And we went, "Really?" "Yeah." "And what happened then?" He says, "Well, I just got dressed and it came down to breakfast with me." "Really? Did your mum see it?" "No, she wasn't there at the time. She'd laid my breakfast out." "And then what happened?" "The little grey got in the taxi with me to school." And, me and my friends at SBI are going, "What?" But we didn't show that. We didn't. "Okay, yeah, then what happened?" "Yeah, he went to school with me and he helped me with a project. I think it was a Great Fire of London. They were doing paper mache or flames or something. I can't remember."
Yeah.
And so we said to him, "Right, okay, did any of your classmates see him?" "Oh, no, just me." Just you?" Yeah, just me." "And so what was he doing?" "He was helping me with my project." "In what way?" And, he went on to describe various things about this project. Long story short, allegedly got back in the taxi with him and took him back to his home. And then we said, "Well, okay, what happened when he came out of the taxi? What happened then?" "He came into the house with me." And then he just disappeared. He disappeared. Yeah. And so, I mean, what do we do? We're there. His mother says, yeah, she was not, saying that never happened or no. She was behind him 100%. It's so controversial that, and the whole case is, and especially that school part, that some readers will, when we read the book, they maybe not accept it, but what do we do? What do we do when people are telling us these stories? Do we say, "Right, I'm sorry, I can't put that in the book, it's too wacky"? I will never, ever not put stuff like this in the book because it sounds wacky, which it does. We must put all these facts in because it's up to the reader to decide, if they're going to go with it or not. And who's to say that this is not something similar that's happened to some other kids elsewhere across Europe? You don't know.
Yeah. Do you think, Malcolm, because you've always had an interest in different types of phenomenon, that helped you deal with what you were being told in this particular case? Because, like I say, often we can look back on certain cases, and there's a little bit more of this I'll get to, but often people might talk about things like this when they're doing interviews with other researchers in different fields, and there'll be specific parts that they're just not interested in and therefore they don't cover, whereas I would suspect, Malcolm, looking back, it would have been easier for you to omit all of what Peter was telling you about this and the family talking about this ghost dog and all the other bits and just focused on that particular event. Whereas I think by excluding it, I think it misses a large portion out, because obviously the sighting was a key event for everybody involved in this, but that wasn't the end of it. And clearly there was a lot of stuff going on here that was affecting this family and her friend as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was another lady, Sharon, and who was involved with the family as well. And I think I devote a full chapter to what, happened with Sharon, because these witnesses came to Sharon's house and strange things happened. To Sharon's house, a totally different lady, just a friend of that family. So it was affecting other people's homes as well. I mean, it got so bad. We did offer Mary Morrison the use of hypnotherapy to kind of calm her down, and because she was very troubled with it, but she refused that, even though she was disturbed by the event. And what also was sad for us as well, because there were so many drawings that the wee boy was doing that night we were there, and I just looked at him and I had to say, "Oh, could we get copies of them?" She says, "No, sorry, you can't get copies of that." And it's a shame, because it's also before I had an iPhone, because I could have taken photographs of them,
Yeah.
But it was before that. That you're talking 1996. And we also left her a lot of UFO sighting account forms, and she promised to return them, but she didn't. Thankfully, Larry Dean, who was also on the case, she had been corresponding with Larry Dean through the post, and Larry Dean says, well, Malcolm, I've got these report forms and I'll send it on to you. So we have copies of those in the book as well. But Jane claims in her written testimony, Jane is Mary's friend, we never got to see her. Yeah. She claims that she was taken. She claims she was taken out of that car and transported somewhere. Now, of course, she was in the car at all times with her friend. But like I said, probably on another radio show that you and I have done, Paul, if you remember the Maureen Puddy case in Australia.
Yes.
She dragged these two UFO investigators out. She says, right, you guys are going to see these UFOs. Come with me, come on. So these two guys are in the back seat of Mary Puddy's car. Any listener listening to this just now, please type in Mary Puddy on Google. You'll see what I mean. And then Mrs. Puddy, they're coming. And she says, I'm being taken. And these two researchers says, she never went anywhere. She was physically there. She never moved out her seat. Now, it begs the question, could this just be the etheric body or a spiritual body that they're taking out, these greys, so they're not physically taking her, they're taking, if you like, for want of a better word, their soul or etheric body, and it's that body that they may be dealing with, and that's an interesting concept.
Yeah. I mean, I've often considered that when we hear reports from experiences and people who claim to have been abducted, Malcolm, that for a lot of people, when they describe their experience, it's as if their soul or their consciousness or whatever is being removed and the body stays in the bed, because often people will be in bed with partners. I know when we spoke last time we were talking about the incident that affected Colin and Gary that we touched on as well, and there was a lot of strange things going on in their bedrooms over the period of what happened after their event. And you hear this a lot from other cases around the world where people will say, oh yeah, well, I was in bed and I felt like I was being taken, but nobody notices they've gone. So for me, when I hear some people talk about this particular experience, I think that there is more to that than meets the eye. It's not the physicality that moves, it's the essence.
Yeah, I'm starting to go down that line of that train of thought now, that maybe that's why, and you hear stories of the husband saying to the wife, what do you mean you were going? I couldn't sleep last night and you were always in the bed. Maybe it was her spirit body or something going along that. I mean, okay, I'm a spiritualist. I firmly believe in life after death, as I mentioned to you on previous shows there.
Yeah.
Oh, I really, really believe that the continuity of the physical body will move and adjust into this new form, and it will see our mums, our dads, our brothers, our sisters in this new environment. Of course, it's not everybody's cup of tea. I never reached this conclusion lightly. It's came after years and years of studies, speaking to clinical physicians. Could it not be oxygen starvation to the brain? Could it be this? Could it be that? You dot the I's, cross the T's. But for me personally, over 40-odd years of research, the wealth of information pertaining to this life after death through near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, is something to be considered for sure. And that's just why I'm referring back to these UFO abductees. Maybe it's not their physicality body, it's some other type of body within.
Yeah. I think when you read the book and you look at what Jane writes compared to what the other witnesses, and I know you mention it in the book as you give us this evidence, Malcolm, Jane's is the one that really stands out. The others are very matter of fact. I mean, Peter's is a very small paragraph, you would suggest, of what it is. Yeah. The daughter doesn't really add anything to it. Jane seems to really have embraced that something strange that doesn't really tally with what anybody else says.
Correct, yeah.
And she talks about wanting to go, really, really wanting to go. And it's only the fact that she got kids that she didn't go with them. And she couldn't deal with this battle, and they kept coming back to her, and she kept saying, no, I can't. I'm too emotionally and physically drained to do this anymore. Leave me alone. I don't want to do it. But she seemed as though she was really invested emotionally in this experience, far more than any of the other witnesses talk about. She describes it feeling wondrous, the way it made her feel. It's a very odd part of this when taken in the full picture of everybody else's report.
Yeah, for sure, it really is, and I was quite astonished when Larry Dean gave us those the UFO account forms, and we saw the written testimony of this lady. She was totally engrossed in what was going on, but then latterly, she didn't want to really get involved with it. It's just a shame, a great, great shame that we never got a chance to meet up with Jane, because I clearly would have loved to have got her testimony, and because this is what it's all about. You try to gain people's trust, etc. And whilst these stories are not to be filed away, and people says, Malcolm, you only write books just to make money. No, you don't. You write these books to get this information out, where somebody in Venezuela or Paraguay may have a wee piece of that puzzle that's missing from my case or somebody else's case, and they'll go, wait a minute, this ties up with that.
Mm-hmm.
All about feeding the public the information, etc. But yeah, it's controversial as well, because we took a lot of flack for believing in this. But I've said before on your show, we laughed at John Logie Baird, the television won't work. It did. We laughed at Marconi. We laughed at the Wright brothers. That'll never fly. It did. People tend to poke fun and make when they shouldn't, because we don't know it all. It's so mysterious,
Yeah. I think the other aspect of all this is as well, because obviously when this happened in 96, you did your interview, you had one sitting, and then I think that the article appeared in Quest magazine's publication, which was it UFO magazine, Malcolm, I think?
Yes, I think it was. Yeah. And also I think also appeared in Uri Geller's Encounters magazine, I believe.
Yeah. And then they said, we don't want to talk about it anymore. We've told a story. We're just going to get on with our lives. People would then say, sceptical people say, well, this story is just so fantastical. They just made it all up. And you think, well, if you're going to follow that train of thought, surely you would. This is the mid-90s, Malcolm. All they would have to do was get booked to go to Roswell. They could do talks. They could travel the circuit out there. They could have probably made a very tidy packet by telling this story over and over and over again and doing TV. And you had, as you appeared yourself on Sightings in America at that point, which was the biggest paranormal TV show in the world at that particular point, that was dealing with cases like this on a regular basis.
Yeah.
They didn't do any of that. None. They just went, right, we've told a story. It's over.
Yeah, you can either look at that two ways. You can either say it really, really did happen and they were too traumatized to take it any further, or B, you flip the coin over and it is one big hoax perpetrated by the people, and I wouldn't say swallowed by us, but given to us, and we obviously were going to the press, we're going to the airports, try to find out more, and maybe they went, wait a minute, this story's getting way above our heads. We never thought it was going to go as big as this. Well, it puts me in mind of the Cottingley Fairies with the two women who did these wonderful cutouts from was it Queen Mary's gift book or something?
Yes.
And they attached it with a hat pin onto the Mossy Bank at the Beck in Cottingley, and it filled eminent Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. His desire to believe in the Cottingley Fairies at that time, along with the Bradford Theosophical Society. I mean, even one of the women themselves says, we didn't realise it would go so far. And when Arthur Conan Doyle became involved, we went, oh my goodness. So is it really, really, really did happen, the Falkland Hill case, or were they making it up? But for what? There certainly was notoriety or money, as you quite rightly said, Paul. And it's a story that got too big. For me personally, I can only go with that one meeting and several telephone calls with the ladies. And you know what? I'll stick my neck on the line and I'll say, I do believe them. I really do. I do believe that happened. I do.
I mean, it'd be, with the greatest respect, Malcolm, it would be extremely difficult to coach a 10-year-old child to perform for you.
It could be done, I guess, but it depends in which context. But you're right, yeah. I mean, it's obviously going to be difficult to a degree, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, because they're not going to know. Because at the end of the day, when you went round, you weren't just on your own. There was, were there 3 or 4 of you there? You were all asking different questions. Yeah. You were all coming in from different angles. They'd talk about certain aspects of it. You would change the conversation because the transcripts that you've copied in from the tapes are in the book, so you can see exactly who's saying what when they're saying it.
Correct.
With the greatest respect, anybody that's been in an interview with more than, with a panel interviewing you, you are hard pressed to keep your wits about your life and your abilities, even though you know that you've done it. It's you. And some people end up forgetting who they are, never mind anything else. So when you're being spoken to by a group of investigators, Malcolm, I would imagine that it's even harder to maintain a level of performance to a group of strangers.
Yeah, I mean, they had never met us. I don't know if she knew who I was, and the wee boy certainly didn't know who I was. Certainly, these strangers are in our house. And now, obviously, I must say to your listeners, we did respect the wishes of the family in the sense that, is it okay to audio tape this? And, they said absolutely fine. Is it okay to interview your son, Peter? Yeah, on you go, Malcolm, no problem. So we did that, with honesty and integrity. Having said that, and I won't go and say who these people were, but we took attacks from other Scottish ufologists who said, that never happened, she never said this. Thank God we had the audio tape proof to sink their boat, because yes, she did say that. Would you like to hear the audio tape? So I don't know why people want to attack other people. I mean, we were there. We did the interview. They were unhappy that obviously it went into UFO magazine. That wasn't us. Tony Dodd wrote that article with the help of Brian Rooney. We promised. I mean, the names that I've been speaking about on your show are not the correct names. Why? Because we're protecting the witnesses' true identities. And this is why we promised them we would never, ever disclose their real identities. Now, sadly, they've moved away. One of the families moved down to Wales, we don't know where, and the other families disappeared as well. And I mean, I'll be honest, I'll be brutally honest and say, if I did find out where they were in Wales, I would, I'd damn well go and try and find out where to find out more about this case, Yeah. That's what we do as researchers,
Yeah. I think it is one of those things as well. It's a very peculiar case because there are so many unanswered questions, Malcolm, about it. Because of what happened and the way that they were, and some of the elements of this particular story and the differing opinions of the key witnesses here. It's perplexing more than anything. And I think as well it also shows the problems that people sometimes have, particularly in that period of time, because people weren't happy that you'd got involved. They wanted to keep everything to themselves. They promised to send you information that you didn't get. Yeah. Things disappeared. There seemed to be this, and sometimes this happens in not just ufology, Malcolm, in a lot of aspects of the Fortean and the strange, that people want to own a case. It's their case, not the witnesses. It's theirs. And if anything, that takes the case away from the witness. It becomes the researcher's case, and they hang their hat on it. This is my case. I own this. You don't have anything to do with it. And I don't think it happens that much these days because we've got so much information out there in a variety of channels. We certainly didn't have the contacts and the ability to investigate things as easily as we do these days, as we did in the mid-90s at all. So if anything, it's harder for people to hold things in and keep a lid on it rather than it was back then. And you see this time and again in the 90s that we've had so many cases that are tantalizingly almost brilliant, but there's just not enough filling at the end of it. It kind of disappears or it just finishes.
Absolutely. And there was another researcher who was on that case as well, who I won't name. And he said, just like what you said a moment ago, he believed it was his case. Now, SPI will never ever step on anybody's toes. If we find out somebody's on a case, then okay, we'll do one or two things. We'll steer away from it. Okay, on you go, no problem. Or B, do you need any help? Anything that we can do to help you with this case? Mm-hmm. And, this guy ran me down for years. He even had his own publication, and on the back page of this, it was the cartoon. It was called The Adventures of Mickey Robertson. Now, my name's Malcolm Robinson. Get that what you want. And at that point, I used to always wear a waistcoat, and this wee Mickey Robertson in the cartoons wearing this waistcoat, and that's quite funny, actually. Oh, no, Malcolm, that's not you. I never did that about you. Pull the other one,
Yeah, nice try. Nice try. I think the other part of all this is that, as I said in the introduction, for many people this case is the cherry on the cake when it came to this particular time. And I know your next project that you're going to be focusing a lot of time on next year is everything that kind of precedes this. Because I remember at that period of time when I was getting into it and I'd started reading the Fortean Times and I'd see the magazine, the UFO magazines were everywhere in newsagents all across the country, and there'd be documentaries and serious panel discussions on the major TV channels, Malcolm, and it would appear, as we were joking before we started the interview, catching you on BBC Breakfast in 1997 talking about this particular area.
Yeah.
What on earth was going on there? I know it's one of those things that people always want answers, and the thing that's always struck me about this particular area, Bonnybridge, and the area around it, I mean, it's not a million miles away. I mean, it's literally down the road from where this incident happened, isn't it? So this case is the kind of lead. If you go backwards, everything that was happening in that sort of late 80s, early 90s period, you know, we didn't just have a handful, a dozen, 50 sightings here. We're talking thousands.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. I mean, it's been called the Falkland Triangle, and I've been interviewed by various people over the past 3 months. So tell us about the Falkland Triangle, Malcolm. And I always say, and I'll say it to your good self, Paul, that there is no such thing as a Falkland Triangle. I spoke to the journalist who says, Malcolm, that was me. I invented the Falkland Triangle. I went, you bugger, you. And, you know, when you look at it, what I'm trying to say here is that there, without a shadow of a doubt, of course there's lots of UFO sightings in the 90s, but that was spread across central Scotland. It wasn't really in a triangle. And once the newspaper guys get a hold of it and look at it on a ruler and look at the cases, they'll make this imaginary triangle. So it wasn't that. And but it's fair to say that Bonnybridge, which really kicked off in 1992 with the with various sightings, was quite bizarre. And but it's fair to say to your listeners that I was involved in the Bonnybridge sightings in 1982, 10 years before Bonnybridge hit its headlines in 1992. So I never even knew Councillor Billy Buchanan at the time, who was instrumental with me in finding out more witnesses and bringing this to the public's attention. So there clearly was an enigma, something going on across the skies of Stirlingshire. And like I've said before, the people of Stirlingshire are well aware that they're on a flight path to Edinburgh Airport, Glasgow Airport, Cumbernauld Airport, which is local. So they see a lot of these red and green navigation lights, the white lights traversing the skies. They know. Then suddenly, in the 1990s, early 1990s, they were coming forward with these bizarre tales of these strange craft flitting across the skies of Stirlingshire. And it was, you know, it was on my doorstep. Basically, I was only about, 9-10 miles away as a crow flies from that time. And so, I mean, I initially heard about it on Central FM, which was a local radio station at the time. And they had this chap called Councillor Billy Buchanan on. And he was telling the listeners about this wave of UFO sightings. And I just had to get in touch with Billy. So long story short, I made myself known to him, and he was so pleased that he had somebody from a recognisable body to try and help him find out what was going on. Because it's fair to say to your listeners that this man, he's a councillor. People came to him, they voted with confidence in this man to help the needs of the Bonnybridge people in Stirlingshire in any way, shape or form. He couldn't believe it when suddenly they're knocking on his door and saying, I'm sorry, Billy, but we're seeing all this strange stuff in the sky, and it's probably no your forte, but we need to tell somebody. And they came to Billy. You know, he couldn't turn them away. He was elected to serve them as their councillor. So when I came on the scene, it was just great. I'll just briefly say that, you know, we did a a big conference with the Japanese at the Norwood Hotel. Not so much a conference, although admittedly I did mention a few things, but there were so many witnesses turned up there, and they were interviewed by Japanese television and herself as well. Then in 1994 we had the big Falkland night with rock band CE4, and myself and Philip Mantle gave a talk to an enormous audience of just over 800 people. And from there it's went in. Now, the UFOs seen above Bonnie Bridge comprise of a number of strange things, from your spherical balls of light which drop down into the landscape, from your cigar-shaped craft, triangular-shaped craft, your classic UFO shape like two soup plates joined rim to rim have been seen in the skies above Bonnie Bridge. And one particular case, the Bestalls, the mother and her son and her daughter were walking along a back road at Bonnie Bridge in the moors. So you've got Bonnie Bridge. It's a nice wee Scottish town, nothing fantastic, just like most Scottish towns. And then behind Bonnie Bridge you have all these fields, farmer fields, and it goes on for miles. So they were up there, Paul, and they were just doing their wee walk. And then suddenly this massive big blue ball of light came down from the sky and landed in a farmer's field. And it was like ball lightning. Maybe it was. But that's what they said. It landed on the field, and suddenly this farmer's fence started to vibrate. And then, of course, at that point, they took fright and they just shot off and they ran away, and they couldn't believe what they had seen. We have also had a gentleman who was driving in his car towards the Castlecarry Viaduct, which is near Bonnie Bridge, and he saw this large black triangular-shaped craft hovering above the viaduct, and he slowed his car down and he's peering through the windscreen of the car. All the other cars on the road are slowing down and looking at this. Then this other black triangle joined the first one, and they were point to point, just hovering above this viaduct, and they screamed away and were gone. And there's so many things ongoing in Bonnie Bridge in the 90s. It was taking up so much of my time, which I was glad for, it was interesting. And there's still sightings today, but I would say either A, not as much as they were back in the 90s, or B, people were just that used to seeing them, they don't even bother now. So it could be one of the other. Just finally on that point, we, as you probably know, that is me and Councillor Billy Buchanan, we got signatures from many people locally, and we went down to 10 Downing Street. We petitioned various Prime Ministers, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, and John Major, and to say, look, you were elected by the people of Great Britain. We have a serious concern here in the skies above Bonnie Bridge. Our research have shown that it's not commercial aircraft or helicopters. We demand that you open up a government inquiry into these sightings in Bonnie Bridge. And I think you know what's coming, Paul. It fell on it fell on deaf ears. The tired old statement came back saying, as these objects do not constitute a threat to the defence of the United Kingdom, there will be no governmental inquiry in regards to the Bonnie Bridge UFO sightings, and nobody will come to Scotland to find out why. And this was so annoying, not just for myself and Billy, but for the residents of Bonnie Bridge and Falkirk and Slamanan and all these various other places as well. Either A, it's they know what's going on themselves as government, and when you look at the Freedom of Information Act files, clearly they do. Or B, maybe they know nothing. Who knows?
Malcolm, what was the name of that woman who saw the blue light?
It was her surname was Bestall, Bestall.
Yeah, same as me then.
Oh, yes, it was. I just realised that, Paul. My God, I just realised that. My God. Oh, sorry.
Hey, don't be daft. Don't be daft. When you said it, I thought, I missed that one. How strange.
Yes, that's right.
Hey,
so it was quite an interesting time, and in Bonnie Bridge, and we've done sky watches there since then. We were there last year with Billy Buchanan, and it's just great to get people out into the fields and look skywards and have a look at what is normally in the air, i.e. your satellites traversing the sky, and it's a good old night. It's always good to go to a UFO hotspot.
Yeah. I think anybody who's not aware of it, if they just go on YouTube and dive into this, there was a lot of interest at the time. You appeared on TV a few times about it. Councillor Buchanan did as well. I remember him being on TV and he was talking about this petition he was trying to do, and he was saying that the MOD had said he got really, really animated about the fact that they told him that he didn't have any tangible evidence. And he was like, what do they mean? No tangible evidence. We've photos, we've witnesses. The people here need to know what's going on. And I think he often used to say, this is not about little green men or UFOs. These are about strange lights in the sky. He was very, very consistent in that, Malcolm. And I think a lot of people dismiss it going, oh, everybody was seeing flying saucers. People were saying they were just seeing really weird lights all the time. This is the thing about it. And I think when people try to dismiss this particular period of history in regards to the UFO cases that were occurring and the sightings that people were having, everybody tries to make out that they were seeing flying saucers. They weren't, were they? They were seeing balls of light. They were seeing strange cigars, black triangles, when black triangles weren't even a thing back then, especially in the UK. Yeah. So Billy was always very straightforward, and he would always, I've seen him numerous times being interviewed where he says, we're not talking about little green men and flying saucers. He said it near enough every time I saw him speak about it on television, Malcolm. And he was of the opinion that they just wanted somebody to come and have a look and see what was happening. They didn't want people turning up saying, oh yeah, it's aliens. Bonnybridge is now the contact spot for intergalactic travel. They just wanted to know what on earth was going on, because as you say, yes, they are equidistant to several major airports in Scotland. The residents were fully aware of what an aeroplane in the sky looked like. And I remember seeing you being interviewed looking at some footage, and you said, yeah, that's an aeroplane, what they filmed there. Because you as well always used to say as well, especially in that period, Malcolm, 95% of things can be explained.
Yeah, I got in trouble with the family when I said that. I think it was a live broadcast from Bonnybridge. And they put him on the spot, and he says, yeah, what do you think of that? And I says, well, it looks like just a normal aircraft navigation lights. And I know who took it. And I know the guy has taken some fantastic footage of UFOs before. But you got to be honest. You can't just tell lies on telly. And then the family, after I finished the interview, the family tore into me. You know full well that my son has taken footage of UFO. I says, I know, but to me, that looks like an aircraft. If I had time to analyse it and go through all the jump through the hoops, maybe it could have been something else. But on first viewing, they want an answer. I gave them an answer. They asked the question.
Absolutely. And it was 8:45 in the morning, Malcolm. My brain's not the quickest at that time of day. I don't care how old I was.
I know. I mean, it comes, people like myself, Phil Manto, and all the lovely guys out there, we're not in this business to get on the telly or this and that and other. Yes, it helps. Yes, you're getting the message out. Of course you are. With the lectures and this and that and other. It's just part and parcel of this scene that we do. You know, it's a public information thing. People want to know about these things. And me, Phil, the other guys, the lovely Kinsella twins, we're the go-to guys for this, you know. So it's just how it goes.
Yeah. I think it is a period for me, Malcolm. I personally think there is so much locked into this particular period of time in that area, and as you say, it still goes on. And maybe, I think, as you said, maybe people aren't reporting it, or maybe they're just so used to it. I also think when you look back at that particular period in time, it doesn't happen that much, but it always tends to occur in local newspapers and things. They will always talk about little green men, and just treat it all as a joke. And I think there are so many people over the years that have come forward with strange encounters and being as honest as they felt they can be, saying, look, this is really strange that's happened to me, and it's unnerved me, it's disturbed me, it's upset me, and they just get laughed at. So eventually you think, especially in this day and age, when you see some of the stories that go viral that people claim, you know, to be marrying pirate ghosts and things, Malcolm.
I'm aware of that one, yeah.
And you know, like the story the other week about people claiming to have found an alien hand on it, and then if you actually read the article, it's clearly a dolphin fin. But that's not the headline. That's not what's making people click the article. And it's it's a dangerous period we're in these days, that we've got so much information available to us, but there's also so much rubbish as well, isn't there?
Absolutely. And, people say, why do I still work with the media? Because I've been, I've done a great interview with this guy, and he promised me the world. He says, yeah, Malcolm, there you go. I've typed out this, what's gone in the paper. It never looked like that in the paper. His editor got a hold of it. He says, no, that's too serious. Give it some salt and pepper, give it some arms and legs, and it totally distorted the story. So it has got a downside. You're right what you're saying, Paul. They want, they did it with Braveheart, the movie, the Scottish hero, Willie Wallace. That movie is only about, you're lucky if it's 56% factually correct. The rest is absolutely nonsense,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we are living in this age. We have to still work with these guys, the media and stuff like that. When we do live television, that is when people like myself, my colleagues, really have that great opportunity for the nation to say it as it is. When I did that thing with Amanda Holden and Phil Schofield and Sean Ryder a few years ago, I knew full well I had to, and I just rattled on like I'm doing just now. And Sean Ryder's looking at me as if to say, when can I come in, So,
yeah,
live television, you got to nail it. You got to.
Absolutely. I think, as you mentioned there, Sean, in my opinion, in the last few years, he's probably done one of the best series about UFOs that's been on television in the UK.
Oh,
Malcolm.
yeah.
Because when it was first advertised, listen, I'm a big fan of Happy Mondays. I grew up listening to Sean Ryder. I've followed his career his entire life. He's as down to earth as they come. So when it was advertised, I was thinking, here we go. So I must admit, I was really surprised how serious and balanced he took it all, because I remember him going to a contactee conference, and he was just, this is all rubbish. This is, they're talking about things 40 years ago. So he clearly knew his salt, and he went to Chile and he met some other people, and he went around. He was clearly very interested, and he obviously spent some time with Alan Godfrey and Travis Walton. So it's one of those shows that I really think, it's often repeated on the History Channel. I think that's got it still, Malcolm.
Yeah.
For me, I think it's a criminally underrated little series. There's only 4 episodes. It's a real shame that they didn't do any more. And I think it's one of those that, I think because it wasn't silly and it wasn't far-fetched and looking, like you say, putting salt and pepper and arms and legs on things.
Yeah.
They didn't like it because it wasn't what, I don't think it was what they expected. It was better than they wanted it to be.
Yeah, that's right. Sometimes the good thing about it as well is we are dealing now with independent television people who are making things for Channel 5 or Channel 4, and they'll tell them what they're doing. They'll maybe get some money from Channel 5. They'll make the programme, and 9 times out of 10 they leave it as it is, which is great, which they did with Sean Ryder, of course. But the powers that be above that might say, no, it's too serious for that. It's not jovial enough. We need it mixed up, and that's where you run into problems with the television people. But myself, as I say, we'll work with them and keep trying to get that message out. The main thing is with my books and my lectures, I always say, don't believe a word I've said. Go out and find out yourself.
Yeah.
Now, with all my books, my previous books, especially the Bob Taylor book, the Technic Woods book, I put 11 theories. I didn't just talk about the case and leave it as is. I went, here, for the skeptics, here's 11 theories that might constitute what possibly could have happened to Robert Taylor. And I did it with my Please Leave Us Alone book about the Irish family who were troubled by paranormal manifestations in their home. I says, okay, here's other things. It could be to do with the mind. It could be they're on medication. And I did ask the permission of that family. I says, look, when it comes to the end of my book, I'm going to have to please the skeptics by putting in things that, maybe you were on drugs, or maybe you're making it up, and maybe this. And he says, Malcolm, please go ahead. We accept that. We're not off our heads. We did see these things, of course. So by doing that, I'm showing the reader that, hey, Of course I'm looking at the B side of the coin. Of course I'm looking at the heads and the tails. And that's what I try to do with the books, to at least show the readers that there is another side to these things. The same way we spoke earlier about the Falkland Hill case. There are possibly two sides to that as well. And I must thank the lovely Chris Evers of Outer Limits magazine for a great cover. Listen, I've got to put that in.
Yeah, well, I think now for anybody that's interested in these particular subjects, it's probably the best it's ever been, as you say, because no longer are investigators or researchers dependent on television or the main media. People can just make their own films and stick them on YouTube. Yeah. They don't need that censorship that exists out there anymore, Malcolm. So all power to anybody that's got the wherewithal and the ability to pull something together. And half the time, the stuff that gets made is usually better than anything you would have normally seen on television anyway, because it doesn't have that filter added to it.
Absolutely, and I've dealt with some people this year, about half a dozen people this year came to my home here in Sauchie, and we've done bits and pieces which should come out, I don't know when, probably early next year, I guess. And so that's good. And then I've got this thing with Channel 5 about Loch Ness. It's coming out in the early part of next year. And also The Unexplained with William Shatner. That's about Bonnie Bridge as well, coming out. So these are all things, again, that we spoke about earlier. It's just part and parcel. It comes with the territory. They'll ask me and they say, look, you were part of Bonnie Bridge, Malcolm. Can you help us with this show? I'm not going to turn them down,
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you touched on, I know you're supposed to be taking next year off. So, are you just doing stuff on telly then next year, Malcolm? Is that why you've decided to sit at home, do some work, and let television do the heavy lifting for you next year, my friend?
No, I mean, no. I'm glad you brought this up. We spoke about this prior to the show. I will be retiring during the course of 2023 for a year, just for a year. I will commit to the two conferences that I've done, and that's at the Scottish UFO and Paranormal Conference in Glasgow University on Saturday, June 17th. I will be speaking there. Then I will be speaking at the Mercure Livingston Hotel in Livingston near Deans, where Robert Taylor saw his UFO. That's another lecture that I promised to go back to, because the last time I spoke there, it was mobbed. A lot of people couldn't get in, and I promised I'd come back. So I'm doing that in August. But the mainstay, Paul, will be to look at my 12th book and really get a lot of good stuff in that as well. And also just to take a back seat after that book's done and travel more throughout Scotland, do more trips here and everywhere. I just want to change my life for 1 year and then come back, all systems guns blazing in 2024.
Absolutely. It's nice to just chill out and relax, because at the end of the day, obviously, as we've spoken over the years, Malcolm, you've been juggling this with a full-time job for the best part of 40 years, haven't you? You've moved up and down the UK. You've moved from Scotland. You've worked in London. You've been on the South Coast. You've gone back to Scotland. It's difficult to fit any hobby in with a full-time job. Never mind one where you're having to race around the country interviewing people and visiting places. It takes its toll. So it's good to look after yourself and take some time and appreciate everything that's around you, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting on now, 66, and I'm not a spring chicken anymore. And so, I'll be taking it a lot easier and stuff. But I'll still be thereabouts, absolutely. You won't get rid of Malky Robinson for sure. But 2023 will just be a few commitments. And, at the end of the day, it's more important for me to speak to lovely people like you, Paul, on podcasts and shows like this and say, look, here's what it's all about. And you're providing a good service yourself. You're speaking to myself, you're speaking to other ufologists, other people in the paranormal field, and you are allowing the stories of these people to really get out in there and let people make up their own minds, because it's a strange old world we're living in for sure. Absolutely.
And that's why we love it, I think. So, Malcolm, where can everybody get hold of your most recent book, your previous work, and follow you online, and no doubt keep up to date as you dive into the world of yoga and scented candles next year?
Yes. Well, obviously my books are available on Amazon. You won't be able to, unfortunately, get them in any bookshop. Mostly they're on Amazon, so just type in there. And so, yeah, you just get them on Amazon.
Fabulous. Malcolm, it's always a pleasure spending some time with you. I love listening to you, and you always dive into your stories with such passion and vigour that it's a real pleasure. And I know we've built up a good friendship over the course of the years, and you're something I always look forward to whenever you've got a new release, primarily because I know I can badger you to get you on the show for a little bit. So listen, thank you as always, and no doubt we'll chat over the next few months. I will desperately try. I'm long overdue a visit to Scotland, I have to say. So if ever in your neck of the woods, my friend, I shall give you a shout, and we'll go for that pint we promised a couple of years ago.
Definitely, Paul. I've got a good few watering holes we can take you to, my friend.
Oh, I expect nothing less. You take the very best of care, Malcolm, and we will speak soon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you again. Thanks. Bye-bye.